The plane lifted off quietly, like a secret exhale. For the first time in years, no one knew where I was. No one could reach me, command me, or guilt me. I watched the city shrink beneath the clouds and felt nothing but relief. When the wheels touched the runway hours later, my phone came alive the moment I turned it on. 23 missed calls, 11 new messages, all from her. The first one read, "Mom, where are you? Why aren't you answering?" Then, "This isn't funny." Then, "If you don't call me back, I'm calling the police." By the 10th message, the tone had changed. "The bank called us. They said the joint account was closed. What did you do?" And finally, the one that made me smile. Not with joy, but with understanding. "You'll ruin us, Mom. Do you even know what you've done?" Yes, I knew exactly what I'd done. I had simply stopped financing my own neglect. For 2 days, I ignored every call. The phone kept vibrating like a guilty conscience. Each new ring sounded less like worry and more like panic measured in dollars. By the third night, curiosity won over silence. I decided to answer once, not for her sake, but for closure. When I picked up, her voice came out high and frantic. "Mom, thank God. Where are you? Why would you just disappear like this?" "I told you," I said calmly. "You wanted space. I'm giving it to you." "That's not what I meant. The police came by asking questions. I had to tell them you were just being stubborn. And then the bank called. Mom, why would you close that account? That money was for emergencies." "For your emergencies," I corrected. I realized my entire life had become one long emergency call. Yours. She went silent for a second, then switched tactics. "You can't just vanish like this. You're scaring everyone. David's furious. The twins keep asking where you are. We're all worried." "Worried about what, Rebecca? That your mother finally took a vacation from being used?" "Used?" she repeated sharply. "That's ridiculous. We're family." "Family?" I let the word linger. "Family doesn't measure love in bank balances." She sighed loudly, the kind of sigh she used when she didn't get her way. "Mom, be reasonable. You're too old to travel alone. Just come home and we'll talk." "I'm safe," I said softly, "and I'm honoring your wish." "What wish?" "You told me your life would be easier without me in it. I'm simply making that true." Her voice broke. "Mom, that's not what I meant. You're twisting my words." "No," I said, steady as stone. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to listen." The line went quiet for a moment, the first real silence between us in years. Then I asked the question that had been waiting behind my ribs. "Tell me, Rebecca, do you need me or do you need my money?" The silence that followed was longer than I expected. No denial, no quick defense. Just breath on the other end, heavy and exposed. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "That's not fair." "It's honest," I said, "and I think we both know the answer." I ended the call. After that, the messages changed again. "No more, Mom, please." Now they said, "You've gone too far." "Do you know what the mortgage company is saying?" "We can't survive without your help." Each message was proof of the same truth. Their love was conditional, and the condition had expired. I turned off the phone and set it face down on the table of my rented apartment. Outside, the world kept moving, people laughing, traffic humming, life existing without my constant participation. I made myself a cup of instant coffee and sat by the window. The cup was cheap, the coffee bitter, but it tasted like freedom. I thought about all the times she'd called me only to complain, to ask, to demand. Never just to say, "How are you, Mom?" Now, when I had finally gone quiet, she was the one begging for a sound. That's the thing about silence. It exposes everything words use to hide. The following morning, I texted her one final message. I'm fine. I'm safe. Please don't call again. I'm giving you what you asked for, a life without me. Take good care of it. No anger, no goodbye. Just closure in plain text. Then I blocked her number, turned off the phone, and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Outside, a new day was starting, soft, golden, and uninterested in my past. I poured another cup of coffee, stretched my stiff fingers, and whispered to myself, peace isn't found, it's claimed. The morning after I silenced my phone, I woke up before sunrise. No alarm, no calls, no obligations, just quiet. For a moment, I didn't move. I simply lay there, staring at the pale ceiling of my small rented apartment. It wasn't fancy, white walls, one wooden chair, a creaky bed, but it was mine. And for the first time in decades, no one expected me to be anywhere else. I got dressed slowly and stepped outside. The air felt new, even though the city wasn't. People hurried past me on their way to work, but I walked without hurry. I wasn't late for anyone anymore. I found a little cafe, tucked between a flower shop and a pharmacy. The smell of bread drifted into the street. I ordered breakfast, just scrambled eggs, fresh bread, and coffee. The kind of meal I used to skip, because there was always someone else to feed first. When the waiter placed the plate in front of me, I realized I hadn't sat down for a meal alone in years without checking my phone between bites. I ate slowly, savoring every taste as if it were proof that I was still alive, still allowed to enjoy small things. Halfway through my coffee, I caught myself smiling, not because of anything big, just because no one needed me. The peace was almost frightening, but in the best way. That afternoon, I kept my appointment with the financial advisor. His office was bright and simple, the kind of place where people go to plan for the future instead of surviving the present. Mrs. Hale, he greeted, extending a polite hand. I've reviewed your documents and pension records. I sat down, heart steady but curious. Be honest with me, I said. Can I live comfortably without depending on anyone ever again? He smiled, typing a few numbers on his screen. With your pension, savings, and investments, yes, more than comfortably. You're in a better position than most retirees. You can afford to live quietly or even travel a little if you wish. Travel, I repeated softly, as if testing the word. I haven't done that in 40 years. Then maybe it's time, he said. Your future doesn't have to be large, it just has to be yours. He showed me a simple plan, how to stretch my income, invest small portions, and let the rest grow safely. No risks, no debts, no dependency. When I left his office, I felt lighter, not because I was rich, but because I finally understood that independence was its own form of wealth. The next day, I signed up for a walking group for older adults. It met every morning at 8 in a nearby park. At first, I was shy. Old habits die hard. But then a woman named Ingrid struck up a conversation as we tied our shoes. She was around my age, with bright eyes that had seen too much but refused to dim. What brought you here? She asked kindly. I laughed softly. A broken heart, I think. She nodded as if she'd heard that answer before. Same here. My son stopped talking to me after I stopped paying his bills. Funny how love gets quiet when the money does. Her honesty startled me and comforted me. We walked side by side for an hour, sharing stories like small confessions. She spoke about guilt. I spoke about relief. When we finished, she squeezed my hand and said, "It doesn't get easier, but it does get lighter." That evening, I thought about her words as I sat by the window with a cup of tea. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about relearning how to breathe without apology. Over the next few weeks, I built tiny routines that belonged only to me. Morning walks, afternoon tea, reading before bed. No sudden calls, no emergencies, no guilt. Some days I laughed at nothing at all. Other days I cried for no reason. But even those tears felt cleaner, freer. I started keeping a small journal, not to write what hurt, but what helped. The first page said, "Breakfast alone, peaceful. Met Ingrid, maybe a friend. Didn't check my phone, victory." I realized healing doesn't arrive with fireworks. It creeps in through quiet mornings and uneventful afternoons. It arrives when you no longer flinch at silence. That night, as I turned off the light, I noticed how still the room was. No calls, no guilt, no weight pressing on my chest. I closed my eyes and smiled to myself. I slept without fear for the first time in years. Peace doesn't mean life stops testing you. Sometimes it just gives you a quieter room to read the next lesson in. A month after settling into my new routine, the phone rang one afternoon. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number, foreign code. But curiosity won. "Mrs. Hale?" a woman's professional voice asked. "This is Sarah Williams from the Family Welfare Department in your home state. I'm reaching out regarding a wellness concern filed by your daughter, Rebecca." My stomach tightened. A wellness concern? "Yes," she continued. "Your daughter reported that you may be suffering from cognitive decline and that you've made financially risky decisions, such as closing accounts and relocating abroad, without proper mental evaluation. She's requesting temporary access to your finances to protect your interests." For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. Then I almost laughed. After years of being her safety net, she was now painting me as unstable, just to get the net back. "Miss Williams," I said evenly, "I can assure you I'm in perfect mental health. My decisions are clear and deliberate. But if proof is what you need, I'm happy to cooperate." "Thank you, ma'am. In such cases, we'll coordinate with the U.S. consulate in your current country to schedule a brief evaluation. It's standard procedure." "That's fine," I replied. "Please let your report reflect that I'm neither missing nor confused. I've simply chosen to live on my own terms." 2 days later, I sat inside a small office at the American consulate. The doctor was an older man, polite and thorough. He asked questions about my memory, my reasoning, my finances. At one point he smiled and said, "You've managed international travel alone, handled complex financial transfers, and built a new routine. That doesn't sound like dementia to me." I suppose being sane just looks suspicious when you finally stop being useful, I said with a faint smile. He chuckled. "You'd be surprised how often that happens." After the exam, he shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Hale, I'll be reporting that you are perfectly capable and independent. If anything, you're sharper than most people. Half your age." "Thank you, doctor," I said, feeling a strange mix of pride and sadness. I wish my daughter believed that too. The next morning, my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, called. "Juliet, we received notice of your daughter's legal attempt to challenge your will and asset transfers." "I'm not surprised," I said. "How serious is it?" "Not very," he replied. "Her claim relies on the same accusation, alleged cognitive decline. but since you've undergone a full medical evaluation abroad and your documents were signed under witness, her case will be dismissed." I exhaled slowly. "Good," he continued. "I also suggest we prepare a defamation claim just in case she will repeats these accusations publicly. False medical claims can have long-term legal consequences." "That won't be necessary," I said after a pause. "The silence of truth will be punishment enough." He hesitated. "You've changed, Juliet." "I've grown tired of being everyone's peace offering," I replied. "Now I choose my peace for myself." That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the lake, I checked my email, a habit I rarely kept anymore. Among travel newsletters and bank updates, one message stood out. The sender's name made my heart pause. David Hale, my son-in-law. I opened it cautiously. "Dear Mrs. Hale, I know I'm the last person you probably want to hear from, but I owe you honesty. I saw the interview you gave online. Your story reached me by accident. I didn't realize how badly Rebecca's words had hurt you until I saw it from your perspective." I froze, reading slower. "You were right about everything. We depended on you too much. I let Rebecca use your generosity as a crutch for our irresponsibility. I thought you didn't mind because you always smiled through it. Now that you're gone, I see how much you carried. The kids miss you terribly. They ask when Grandma will come back. I've told them the truth, that their mother said things no child should ever say to a parent, and that you needed distance to heal." My eyes blurred. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that at least one person in this family sees the damage we caused. I hope you're happy and safe. You deserve peace more than anyone I know." I sat there for a long time after reading it, the screen glowing softly in the dark. I didn't reply, not because I was bitter, but because I didn't need to. The words I had waited years to hear had finally arrived, even if too late. I closed the laptop and made myself a cup of tea. The sound of the kettle, the gentle clink of porcelain, the evening silence, all of it felt sacred. Once, their approval had been my oxygen. Now their absence was my freedom. That night, I slipped into bed without checking my phone, without rehearsing old arguments, without replaying what-ifs. The city outside murmured softly, a lullaby I didn't have to earn. And for the second time in my life, I slept without fear. Only peace. Justice rarely arrives with noise. Sometimes it comes folded neatly inside an envelope marked bank correspondence. 3 months after that last email, I received a message from my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. "Juliet," he said on the phone, voice calm but almost amused. "You might want to sit down. The bank just finalized the foreclosure on your daughter's property." For a moment, I didn't say anything. The word foreclosure should have sounded cruel, but instead it felt inevitable. "What does that mean for me?" I asked quietly. "Well," he continued, "because you were a co-signer on the mortgage and had covered multiple payments in the past, the bank recognizes your partial ownership. You're legally entitled to reclaim your contribution with accrued interest." I could hear the faint rustle of papers through the line. "That amounts to approximately $185,000. They've already prepared the transfer authorization." I smiled faintly. So the money I thought was gone forever has just come back home, he finished. I thanked him and hung up. For a while, I just sat there in silence, watching the afternoon light spill across the table. When I'd given Rebecca that money years ago, I thought I was buying her security. But in truth, I'd been paying rent for love that was never truly mine. Now the debt had balanced itself, not through anger, but through time. A week later, another call came. "Your old apartment has been sold," Mr. Reynolds informed me. "After taxes and closing costs, you'll receive $95,000. Between that and the bank settlement, you're in the strongest financial position of your life." I laughed softly, the sound surprising even me. At 72, I've finally learned how to make money by letting go of the people who wasted it. He chuckled. "Poetic and true. What will you do now?" I looked around my small apartment, the simple furniture, the potted plant by the window, the stack of notebooks I had started filling again. "I think I'll build something that doesn't collapse when love turns selfish," I said. "Then you've already won," he replied before hanging up. That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting a letter, not to Rebecca, but to myself, a short, final message that I would never send but needed to write. "Words have prices," I typed. "Some are paid with apologies, others with silence. Yours were paid in full the moment I stopped answering." I reread the line twice, smiled, and closed the document. It wasn't revenge, it was accounting, emotional balance restored. I had spent most of my life believing that forgiveness meant letting people hurt you without consequences. But now I understood. True forgiveness is not pretending it never happened. It's living well despite it. The next morning, I went for a walk by the lake. The water was still, reflecting the clouds like old memories, soft, pale, and harmless now. I watched a few ducks glide past and felt a strange gratitude, not for what happened, but for what it taught me. Pain, when it's done teaching, leaves behind wisdom. Mine had left behind peace. When I returned home, I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh notebook. On the cover, I wrote in black ink, "When love costs too much, a guide for mothers on boundaries." I wanted to create something for the women like me, the ones who had mistaken self-sacrifice for love, who had raised children only to be forgotten, who believed giving endlessly was the same as being loved deeply. I wanted to teach them what I had learned too late, that a mother's worth isn't measured by what she gives up, but by what she refuses to lose, her dignity, her voice, her sanity. Page by page, I outlined chapters. The price of overgiving. Saying no without apology, when guilt becomes control. Rebuilding a life that's yours. Writing felt like therapy, but cleaner. No tears, no blame, just clarity. A few days later, I received confirmation that all the transfers had cleared. My accounts now showed more numbers than I had ever seen at once. But the most precious balance I had gained couldn't be measured. For the first time in my adult life, no one could reach into my pocket, my heart, or my peace without permission. As I sat by the window that evening, the sky turning gold over the water, I whispered a quiet prayer. Not for Rebecca, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. "Let her one day learn what love really means," I said softly. "And let me never forget what it doesn't." The light dimmed, the day folded itself neatly into night, and I closed my notebook with a steady hand. I had not punished anyone. I had simply stopped participating in my own destruction. Justice, not revenge. And for once, that was enough. It arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, an ordinary envelope, hand-addressed in uneven handwriting, the kind that can only belong to children learning how to write their names. When I saw the return address, my breath caught. Rebecca's Town. But the sender line didn't say her name. It said simply, Liam and Lily, my grandchildren. For a long time, I just held the letter. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from something gentler. Hope, maybe. A hope I hadn't dared to feel in years. I opened it carefully, as if it might break. Inside were 2 pages covered in blue marker and crooked pencil lines. Dear Grandma, Mom told us you live far away now. Dad said it's because grown-ups sometimes need time to think. We wanted to tell you that we miss you. We remember your pancakes and the bedtime stories you used to read when Mom and Dad went out. We also know that Mom said something very bad to you, and we understand why you're gone. We just want you to know that we love you, even if we can't see you right now. When we're older, we hope we can come visit you where you live. We want to see the lake and feed the ducks with you again. Love, Liam and Lily. At the bottom were 2 little hearts drawn in red, uneven but full of sincerity. There were even tiny stick figures, one labeled Grandma, standing beside 2 smiling children under a mountain sun. By the time I finished reading, tears blurred the page. Not the kind of tears that come from pain, the kind that come from recognition, from realizing that love can skip a generation and still find you. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and began writing back. My hands were steady, my words were light. My dearest Liam and Lily, your letter is the most precious gift I have received in many years. I keep it by my window, where the sunlight touches it every morning. It reminds me that kindness still grows, even from broken roots. I told them about the little park near my apartment where the swans glide on the lake, and how I feed them breadcrumbs and think of them each time. I told them that I'm healthy, that I paint now, and that I've learned how to make chocolate pancakes better than ever. Then I added what I needed them to know, the only lesson I wanted to pass on. Always love your parents, but remember this rule, my darlings. Respect and responsibility come first. Love without respect becomes guilt, and love without responsibility becomes dependence. Never let either steal your peace. I ended the letter gently. For my grandchildren, the door to my heart will always stay open. For cruelty and abuse, it will forever stay closed. That's the promise I make, to protect both you and me. I signed it with all my love, Grandma Juliet. I sealed the envelope and felt a sense of quiet completion. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was something truer, connection without condition. That evening, I walked to the post office and mailed the letter. Outside, the sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in gold and lavender. I stood there for a while, breathing in the crisp air, feeling both older and lighter. For the first time, I didn't wish things had gone differently. Every wound, every hard decision, every sleepless night had led me here. To this peace, to this boundary that didn't need to scream to be heard. Maybe one day those children would visit, maybe they wouldn't. But either way, they would grow up knowing what love looks like when it finally learns to protect itself. And that was enough. That night, I placed their letter beside my bed. The handwriting was messy, the paper wrinkled, but it glowed under the lamplight like a promise. I whispered softly into the quiet room. For my grandchildren, the door is open. For abuse, it stays closed. Then I turned off the light and let peace, real peace, settle over me. Like a blanket I'd finally earned. I've learned something precious through all of this, something that took me a lifetime to understand. Real love doesn't demand self-destruction. It doesn't ask you to shrink, to disappear, or to break yourself just to be worthy of someone's comfort. It builds, it heals, it listens. And when it stops doing those things, it's no longer love. It's obligation dressed in affection. Walking away didn't make me cold, it made me whole. And forgiving myself for years of silence was the kindest thing I've ever done. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt drained by the people who should have cared for you most, know this: your boundaries are not cruelty, and your peace is not selfishness. You are allowed to protect the love that still lives inside you. So tonight, as I sit by the window, watching the last light fade, I whisper one final truth. Sometimes saving yourself is the most loving thing you can do. Did this story touch you or help you reflect on something in your own life? Comment below and tell me which city you're listening from. I always love reading your messages. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, stories about strength, healing, and rediscovery, please subscribe and support the channel. Your kindness, your comments, and your super thanks are what help me keep bringing these life stories to you every week. Thank you for listening with all my heart. See you in the next story. It was my daughter's 43rd birthday. I arrived at her house early that morning, carrying a cake from her favorite bakery, chocolate with strawberries, the same flavor she used to beg for when she was little. I had even added a small golden ribbon on top, just to make it feel special. When she opened the door, I expected a smile. Instead, she looked at me as if I was an unexpected delivery. "Oh," she said flatly, "it's you." I forced a small laugh. "Of course it's me, sweetheart. Happy birthday." I held out the cake, pretending not to notice the irritation on her face. "Your favorite. I thought we could celebrate together." She stepped aside without looking at me. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her tone colder than the morning air. I followed her into the living room, clutching the cake like a peace offering. Everything around me was perfect: spotless furniture, expensive decor, the kind of life I had spent years helping her build. "Listen," she started, sitting down and folding her arms. "I've been thinking about what I really want this year." I smiled, relieved that the tension might pass. "Oh, I can guess. Maybe that bracelet you saw last month? Or a little trip. You know I'll get it for you." She looked at me then, her eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. "No," she said slowly. "What I really want is for you to just die." The words hit harder than any slap. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The cake box trembled in my hands, the candles leaning sideways, wax smudging the icing. I laughed nervously, hoping she was joking. "Rebecca, that's not funny." "I'm not joking," she interrupted. "I'm tired of you showing up, calling all the time, acting like I can't live without you. My life would be easier if you weren't in it." I stood there frozen, the sound of my heartbeat louder than her voice. My mouth went dry. 43 years of love, care, and sacrifice, reduced to a wish for my death. "I see," I whispered, forcing a nod. "Well, happy birthday, my dear." I walked to the door, the cake still in my shaking hands. I didn't look back. Outside, the sunlight felt different, harsh, almost cruel. That night, I threw the uneaten cake into the trash, watched the candles sink into the frosting, and whispered to myself. Something inside me finally woke up. I sat at my kitchen table that night with a notebook and an old calculator. The same table where I used to cut her sandwiches into little hearts for school. Now it held only silence, a pen, and the weight of 43 years of giving. I started writing numbers, not feelings. Feelings had already failed me. Preschool tuition, $200. I could still hear her tiny voice, "Mommy, don't leave yet." I'd kissed her forehead and promised I'd be right back after work. I always kept that promise. Elementary trips and supplies, $7,000. Every backpack, every new pair of shoes, so she'd never feel different from the richer kids. High school prom dress, $850. I had worked overtime for 3 straight weekends to buy it. When she twirled in front of the mirror, she said, "You're the best mom ever." I believed her. College tuition, $46,000. 3 different majors, 3 different dreams. Every time she changed direction, I told her, "Follow your heart, I'll handle the rest." My hands still ached from those double shifts at the hospital. Wedding, $32,000. The hall, the flowers, the dress that shimmered like moonlight. She'd cried and whispered, "I don't deserve you." I wish I'd written that down too, just to remind myself it really happened. Down payment on the house, $120,000. That was my retirement fund. I'd told myself, she'll take care of me later. How naive. Emergency months, $16,000. When her husband lost his job, I paid their mortgage and filled their fridge. She'd hugged me then. "You always save us, Mom." I remember thinking how proud I was to be needed. Braces for the twins, $4,000. Her kids, my joy. I never imagined I'd one day be forbidden to see their smiles. Birthday gifts, holidays, small loans that were never repaid. Another $10,000, maybe more. I totaled the column, roughly $258,000, not counting the things you can't measure. Lost sleep, missed vacations, canceled dreams. My handwriting looked shaky, like it belonged to someone else. Maybe it did. Maybe the woman who used to live for her daughter had already started to fade. For every figure, a memory surfaced, small, bright, and cruelly warm. When she got pneumonia at 3, "Don't cry, Mommy, I'll be brave." When she graduated college, "I owe it all to you." When she bought that house, "You'll always have a room here." Promises, like receipts, fade with time. I turned to a fresh page and made 2 columns. Column A, money given. Column B, love returned. Column A filled fast. Column B stayed almost blank. I wrote the only honest entry under column B. 1 hug before her wedding. I stared at that lonely line until the numbers blurred. Maybe I had mistaken dependency for affection. Maybe she had learned from me that love always comes with payment terms. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. I thought of calling her, of asking how a daughter's love could rot into contempt. Then I saw the total again and realized the question no longer mattered. I had given her everything that should have built gratitude, but all it had built was entitlement. My sacrifices had taught her that I was a resource, not a person. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was her lifetime subscription to comfort. I flipped the notebook shut and whispered, "Enough." The room was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I poured myself a small glass of water, hands trembling less than they had that afternoon. For the first time in decades, I felt something close to control. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and looked at the woman staring back. Wrinkles carved by worry, eyes still kind but sharper now. I touched the notebook against my chest. "I didn't raise a daughter," I said softly. "I funded a project." And that project had just reached its final payment. The next morning, I woke up with the same question circling in my mind like a restless bird. Did she really mean it? Maybe she'd been angry. Maybe she didn't realize how cruel her words were. A mother's heart always looks for excuses. I stared at the phone for hours before finally picking it up. My hands were cold. When she answered, her voice was dry, distracted, the voice of someone already far away. "Rebecca, it's Mom," I said quietly. "I just wanted to ask about yesterday. Did you really mean what you said?" A short silence, then a sigh. "Mom, please don't start again. You always take everything so seriously." "I just need to understand, sweetheart. You said your life would be easier if I died. That wasn't a joke, right?" Another pause. I could almost hear her rolling her eyes. "Mom, what I meant was that you're too much. You call all the time, you show up without notice, you ask too many questions. I just need some space." "Space," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "After everything I've done, I didn't think you'd ever need space from love." "It's not love when it's suffocating," she snapped. "You've made my life about you, your feelings, your worries, your drama. I can't breathe like this." My fingers gripped the phone so hard they hurt. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I understand," I said softly. "You need space." "Exactly," she said, relieved, as if she'd finally convinced a stubborn client. That was it. No apology, no warmth, just boundaries carved like walls. 2 days later, she called me again. Not to talk, not to check on me. She needed a favor. "Mom, the twins have a school event Friday night. David and I have a dinner we can't miss. Can you come watch them?" I waited a moment before answering. In the past, I would have said yes instantly, even if I was sick, tired, or had other plans. But that woman had been buried with a cake. "I can't," I said simply. "You can't?" she repeated, confused. "What do you mean you can't?" "I have plans." "What plans? Since when do you have plans?" she said with a sharp laugh, the kind that cuts more than any insult. "Plans that don't involve being taken for granted," I replied. There was a long silence. Then she said, "Mom, stop being dramatic. The kids need you." "No, Rebecca," I said firmly. "You need me. The kids just love me." She sighed, frustrated. "So that's it? You're going to punish me now?" "No, I'm learning to respect what you asked for." "What's that supposed to mean?" "You wanted space," I said. "So I'm giving it to you." I heard her breathe out sharply. "Fine, do whatever you want, but don't come running to me later when you're lonely." "I've been lonely for years," I said before hanging up. That call changed something inside me. I sat on my couch, staring at the same empty walls, and realized that all my life I had mistaken access for love. Just because she answered my calls didn't mean she wanted to hear my voice. Just because she let me help didn't mean she valued my help. She only reached out when there was something to gain. And I always gave out of fear that withholding anything would make me lose her completely. But maybe I had already lost her, piece by piece, every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. That night, I wrote 3 small sentences on a piece of paper and taped it to my mirror. No is not cruelty. Love doesn't mean debt. No more emotional credit without interest. For years, I had loaned her kindness she never intended to repay. Every apology she skipped, every promise she broke, every favor she demanded, I absorbed it like interest-free pain. But not anymore. I owed myself the same devotion I'd given her. The phone rang again a few hours later. This time I didn't answer. I turned off the lights, sat quietly, and let the silence grow comfortable around me. It didn't sound empty anymore. It sounded like ownership of my peace, my time, my boundaries. For the first time in decades, I didn't chase her voice. I didn't wait for her apology. I didn't plan the next sacrifice. I just let the world be quiet and whispered to myself, "Space granted." By the third morning, my tears had dried into something else. Not anger, not even pain. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize the storm outside can't hurt you if you finally close the window. I woke up early, dressed neatly, and packed a folder of old bank documents. It was time to clean my life the same way I once cleaned her childhood room after every tantrum. The first stop was the bank, the same branch where I'd opened a joint emergency account years ago, just in case she or her husband ever needed help. Back then, it made me feel like a good mother to be prepared for their crises. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," the manager greeted politely. He had known me for years. "How can we help you today?" I smiled. "I'd like to close a joint account, number ending in 9832. He blinked, surprised. "That's your emergency fund, isn't it?" "It was," I said softly. "Now it's just a reminder." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded and began typing. "Would you like to transfer the balance to your personal account?" "Yes, every penny." He slid the papers toward me. I signed them without hesitation. The pen didn't tremble. For the first time, I wasn't signing to give. I was signing to reclaim. When the transfer confirmation printed out, I folded it carefully and slipped it into my purse. It wasn't revenge, it was math. $20,000 of math that now belonged to peace. My next stop was the lawyer's office. An old friend, Mr. Reynolds, had handled my will since my husband's death. When I walked in, he gave me that familiar, warm smile. "Juliet, it's been ages. Everything all right?" "Better than it's been in years," I said, taking a seat. "I need to make some changes." He nodded. "What kind?" "I want to update my will, remove my daughter as beneficiary from everything." He paused, lowering his glasses. "That's quite a big change, are you sure?" "I've never been surer." We spent the next hour reviewing every document, my small apartment, savings, investments, and life insurance. "I'd like to leave half to the Children's Orphan Fund," I told him. "They actually value care, and the rest, a trust for my grandchildren. But they can't touch it until they turn 25. He nodded, making notes. "That's fair and wise." "Also," I added, "cancel the health insurance plan I pay under Rebecca's name. She's capable of paying her own." When the last signature was done, he looked at me thoughtfully. "You seem calm, Juliet. I expected anger." I smiled. "Anger is still about them. This," I gestured to the stack of papers, "is about me." The third stop was the mortgage office, the same place where I had co-signed their house loan. The house that now held all her contempt like expensive wallpaper. The loan officer, a kind woman named Miss Peterson, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Hale, what can I do for you?" "I need a copy of my co-signer agreement," I said, "and any record of delayed payments." She frowned. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," I said gently. "Just information." She disappeared for a few minutes, then returned with a thick folder. "I remember you covered several months of missed payments last year. You're entitled to request documentation or even claim property rights if necessary." I took the folder. That's exactly what I needed. As I flipped through the pages, each line of ink felt like a piece of my old life fading away. The day I'd signed those papers, Rebecca had hugged me and said, "You're our guardian angel." Now those same papers were my shield, not hers. When I left the office, the afternoon sun hit my face, warm and clean. The world looked exactly the same, but I wasn't. For the first time, my steps didn't drag. I stopped at a small cafe on the corner and ordered a cup of chamomile tea. The waiter brought it in a delicate white cup, steam curling like quiet forgiveness. I sat there, sipping slowly, the folder of documents beside me, bank transfers, revised will, proof of rights, the paperwork of freedom. People always think letting go means rage, but it doesn't. Sometimes it's just signatures and silence. I took a deep breath, my hands steady around the warm porcelain. Everything I had built for her, the money, the safety nets, the endless rescues, had also built my own cage. Now, paper by paper, I was unlocking the door. I looked down at my reflection in the tea and smiled faintly. My hands no longer shook. The following days were strangely peaceful. Not because things were fine, but because I had finally stopped begging them to be. I spent hours thinking about what freedom could look like at 72. Not the kind with beaches and cocktails, but the kind where no one expected me to drop everything at the sound of their name. It started with a plan, a simple, quiet plan that only one person would know. My neighbor, Mrs. Elvira, had lived across the hall for 10 years. She was the kind of woman who always left fresh flowers by my door on Mother's Day and never asked for explanations when she saw me crying in the elevator. That evening, I invited her for tea. She noticed the papers on my table and the seriousness in my eyes. "What's going on, Juliet?" she asked gently. "I'm leaving," I said. "Not running away, just leaving." She blinked. "Leaving where?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere far enough that the only voice I'll hear in the morning will be my own." Her hand found mine across the table. "Good. You've given enough to everyone else. It's about time you give something to yourself." I told her my plan in detail. "If anything happens, or if you don't hear from me for 48 hours, I want you to go into my apartment. There's a sealed envelope on the kitchen table. It's for Rebecca. Inside there's a letter, copies of my will, and proof that I've cut all ties. You'll hand it to her personally." Elvira nodded, her eyes sharp with loyalty. "Consider it done." "I trust you," I whispered. "You should," she replied. "I've seen enough of your pain to want you free." The next morning, I dressed neatly, combed my hair, and went to the bank one last time. I withdrew $30,000 in cash, enough to start a new life wherever that life might take me. The young teller hesitated when she saw the amount. "Are you sure, ma'am? That's a lot to carry?" I smiled faintly. "It's lighter than regret." She didn't ask another question. When I returned home, I placed the envelope of cash inside a small metal safe under my bed. My entire world now fit in that safe, a passport, cash, and a new sense of purpose. That night, I began writing the letter. It started like this: "My dear Rebecca, you asked me to disappear from your life, and I have decided to give you exactly that. By the time you read this, I will be far away, starting the life I should have lived years ago." The words came slowly at first, but once they started, they didn't stop. I wrote about the sleepless nights, the endless sacrifices, the years of working 2 jobs so she could have her perfect life. I wrote about the laughter that used to fill her house and the silence that had replaced it. Every page was a mirror of truth. Page after page, I documented everything: the tuition payments, the mortgage months, the insurance, the unpaid loans. I wanted her to see her childhood and adulthood not as gifts, but as invoices of love. I didn't write with bitterness. I wrote with precision, like someone preparing a final report. Love can be warm, but sometimes it needs to be audited. On the 23rd page, I wrote the line that had been living inside my chest for days. Life without me will be easier, Rebecca, and much more expensive. I signed it with calm handwriting, sealed it inside a cream-colored envelope, and placed it beside the legal documents. Then I wrote one more note for Elvira. If I don't call you within 2 days, deliver everything. I slid the key to my apartment under her doormat the next morning. By Sunday afternoon, my plan was complete. I had no reason left to wait for another apology that would never come. I opened my laptop and booked a one-way ticket. No return, no explanation, just departure. When the confirmation email arrived, I stared at it for a long time. My name, destination, date. Proof that the next chapter had a beginning, even if I didn't yet know the ending. I sat on my bed, holding the printed ticket. For the first time in decades, I wasn't reacting to someone else's needs. I was acting for my own survival. No more begging for love, no more waiting for kindness, no more access without respect. I poured myself a cup of tea, breathing in its calm scent. My hands, the same hands that once shook holding a cake, were steady now. As the sun began to set, I whispered, "Let her think I've vanished. In a way, I already have."